So welcome everybody. I'm Veronika Pisano from Mono, and just on the beginning, Mono, it's non-profit or non-governmental organization, and we try to focus on long-form and narrative journalism, and that's why we cooperate with here to do the workshop we did today for this young or for the Slovak journalist, and we also connected with this discussion. So here we have Christian Lupsa. He's a editor-in-chief and also co-founder or co-founder with four other people of the magazine, quarterly magazine Door, and Tomáš Prokopčák, who is deputy editor-in-chief of Daily SME, responsible for technical part, digital publishing. So topic of today's discussion is long-form journalism, and the first question, because not everybody understands this this topic or this term, long-form journalism, what is it? So maybe who wants to explain? Maybe Christian first. You can take the microphone. That how we should understand the long-form journalism, because for many people it's like, okay, if the article has more than 800 words, that's the long-form journalism. Is it true?
Hi, first of all, this was going to be my first time talking with a dog next to me, so I'm really sorry it's not happening, but I'll try to fix it. So thank you all for coming, and thank you if you're interested in long form. This can only be good news for any of us who care about this form. So this word has come about in the last few years as we've discovered that people can actually read longer than one page on the internet. For some of us that was not a surprise. For many people who thought internet writing is something that should be fast and quick, it came as a surprise. So stories that have been around for more than a century and which carried the names, some names that you might know, like reportage, literary journalism, narrative journalism, creative nonfiction, call it what you like, are now put under this umbrella term of long-form journalism. And what this basically means to me is these are stories that are reported more in depth than your regular news stories, so people spend more time with them, they're more intimate. They're character-driven, so there's people in these stories that want something, do something, try to get something. And the goal of these stories, as opposed to news that wants to give you information, the goal of narrative or story is to give you the experience and the feeling that you are in somebody's shoes or that you're witnessing an event as if you were there. So it's very... it's centered on giving you an experience and an emotion.
Okay, Tomáš, what about you? Do you understand it the same, or you see some difference in how we understand it in Slovakia?
In Slovakia, is everybody talking about it and nobody knows what it is. So, because we think that that long form is story which has more than 1,000 words. But it's not true. The long form is, for me personally, a story when you are thinking differently about the structure of that story and about that impact the story on your audience has. So that's for me the long form. But I don't know the dictionary definition of this word.
Okay, you mentioned impact, so stay with that. Let's right now focus on Slovakia and Romania, and right now on maybe you too. And I would just add my own experience that the article that influenced me personally, and it was really long form, was Fatal Distraction. I think many of you might read it in Slovak because it was translated last summer. It's about why or how the little children die in the cars because they are being forgotten by their parents. So that had really big impact on me, because my son was born, I was reading it, and in that moment I understood like how this can happen. So what was maybe the article, which article was that for you that had that impact on you, and maybe in Slovakia that maybe had some big impact?
On me personally, or on Slovak society? For me personally, the most important story was Snowfall, because I'm interested in... Snowfall was a story of New York Times in 2012 about avalanches and snow in some part of USA. But the most important part of the story was the form, not the story itself, but how it was presented on the web. So I started to think if it's possible in Slovakia to create something which will look like this story. And traditional media were not able to make this sort of stories. So we started Mono, yes.
Okay, thank you. Christian?
I distinctly remember reading this story about 10 years ago that was published in the US edition of Esquire. And it's a story about a blind man who is given an opportunity to see. So he can get an operation and he could technically see. So that should be an easy choice, right? If you're blind and you can get surgery and that you can see, then it's obviously the thing you want to do. But as Thomas was saying, structure is really important in these kinds of stories. So this whole story is built, it makes you argue with the story. So it makes you say, yes, of course he should get the surgery. Then the story changes and says, this man is next to 50. He's married, has 2 kids. He's an Olympic level skier for the blind. He leads his own company that makes GPS devices for the blind. He has a perfect life. So why ruin a perfect life by getting surgery? So then you say, please don't get surgery. And then they tell you everything he's done in his life is to challenge the status quo. So then you switch again and you go, yes, of course he should get that surgery. So at the end of the story, I was like, this is an experience as a reader that you don't get. You get to interact with the story on a very emotional and deep level. So I've decided, it was my desire to try to do these stories and create this kind of effect on readers. And I think there was one story that made some journalists in Romania realize that there's this thing going on, and it's by the same guy that wrote that story you mentioned, Fatal Distraction, Gene Weingarten, who writes for the Washington Post. And it was a story about a guy who was a world-class violin player who played in the Washington subway. Some of you might know this story. So world-class violin player and his really expensive Stradivarius, and nobody stopped to listen, almost nobody stopped to listen. So it's a story about, can we recognize beauty when we're so busy going about our daily lives? So people read that and said, we want more stories like this. I'm like, yeah, you just need to start to do them.
And then you started your magazine.
It's not that simple, but yeah, close to it, yeah.
So you mentioned that this was the impact, but so how is the state of journalism in Romania? And you know a little bit about Slovakia, and if you compare it, so maybe compare for us and for the Slovak audience.
So my extensive knowledge of Slovak media, so this is my second time here, and from what I gathered, your daily journalism and your weekly journalism is way better than what we have in Romania. There's way more competition. There's a way higher percentage of people that subscribe and buy even newspapers. We don't have anything resembling a paywall, so people don't pay for content online. So your sort of the core of the journalism here, whether you believe me or not, but I just have to tell you, is better than where we're at. Journalism in Romania is so weak right now that it allows for institutions like ours to exist. So really small independent places, some on paper, some online, that are doing the work that the regular media isn't doing. So outfits that do investigative work on the side, or that cover city issues, or write about, you know, technology and food and everything. So I think the best work in my country is done by the alternatives. While here, I think there's still strong work done by the establishment.
Okay, Tomáš, do you agree with that?
I was never in Romania, so I don't know. I think that split that was made by the Den again and the impact of this new newspaper was very good for Slovakia and Slovak journalism. So at the end, we produce better stories. Also in Smedeli, in Den again, maybe in Mono, and in actuality. So I think the situation in Slovakia for newspapers and journalists is now very good, but it's not economically good, but for stories is good.
Okay, so what about, was there any point in the recent history when Slovak journalists realized that long form can work in Slovakia in some way?
Maybe when Detroit was produced. That's about 3 years ago or 4 years ago, when Tomáš wrote a story about automotive industry in Slovakia and the impacts and about the impacts of this industry on country and on the city. He visited Detroit for 1 or 2 weeks and made that comparison with, of the situation in Detroit and of future in Slovakia. And when this story was published, some people in media realized that good quality reporting in a form of long read is possible in Slovakia to write.
Was it also the point when like Mono realized, or you, the founders of Mono, realized that this can maybe work and let's do it somehow more full-time, like not really full-time, but more, be more engaged in Mono?
We published our first long form 2 weeks earlier, so our celibacy, the story about non-saints in church and about a priest who has 4 children, was published 2 weeks earlier than Detroit. So we believed that it's possible a way early than Detroit was published. But after Detroit, we saw that it's possible in Slovakia to write these long stories. But at the time we were working in Smedeli and in Trend weekly magazine, so we were working, or our employers were tolerant to us, and we also saw that in our media which pay a salary, it's possible to make these stories. So if the question is if after the Detroit we think that it's possible to in Slovakia to write some long forms, yes, we saw it.
Okay, but there was actually that maybe kind of excitement. This is gonna be happening more often, maybe like once a month. That there is gonna be such a story as Detroit. That in reality, we have such a story maybe once in half a year, maybe, if I'm optimistic. So why is that?
In small media, it's possible to make some story on monthly basis when it's your hobby. But in a big media, the real conclusion was that if we have a story, if we have a time, we can produce this kind of story every 3 months. That was in 2013-14 in Smedeli. Now we are trying to produce some bigger stories on monthly basis, but in traditional media it's not very cost effective to make some story which will end as a long form. In Mono we were happy to make every month a story, but after 4 or 5 months we were not so happy.
Okay, so Christian, your magazine is not the traditional media. So how this idea started to make a long-form magazine quarterly?
Before I answer that, can you guys help me get a sense of, are you, who here is a journalist or works for media organization? Okay, so this side of the room, okay. And the other side of the room, are you journalism students or just?
Any students here of journalism, medium, or related?
Okay. Okay.
Okay, how many of you like to read, long read here? Okay, that's better.
Okay.
Now we've got the other part of the room.
So I think what is relevant about the way we started, because we don't have a media culture where this kind of work is necessarily needed, treasured, produced. I think the reason why what we do caught on is not because we started as a magazine that publishes long form, is because we started as an independent magazine in an empty space. So it was less about the long form, and it was more about the energy behind an independent product created outside the mainstream media. Because when we started, we had very short stories. We had personal essays, which is not a form that is usually done in this part of the world, so personal writing. And then we had a few longer things. Now, 6 years later, our stories are tougher, more complicated. But when we started, people liked us more because of how we talked online, because we had launch parties at every event, so people could come and drink, and we could, talk about various stories, that we had bands come and play, that we invited our readers to come and eat in our newsroom. We had dinners with them. So it was less about how good the stories were. Hopefully they liked the stories too, but it was more about creating a kind of connection. And I think you can do that with a media product that does good work without that necessarily needing to be long form. So I think people don't read us because they say, here's a place that has these kinds of stories that I can also read from abroad. They connect with us because they think that we reflect something about what happens in Romania, and through these longer, more complicated stuff, they can learn about what it means to be, living in modern day Romania.
So right now you are existing 6th year, and which issue?
We put out 23 issues so far, 24.
And the last one had around 200 pages.
The magazine right now is about 200 to 216 pages.
So how does it work from the financial point of view? How do you finance this? Is it profitable, or is it even reasonable to keep going?
No, the short answer to both of those is no. I think there's a level of insanity that one needs to have to make an enterprise like this go along. We're not sustainable, which means we're far from being profitable. For a long time, I think for the first 4 years, almost everything that we published was volunteer work, and people who wrote for us, took photographs, did illustration, worked much harder for us than they did for the places that paid them. We worked them to death because we established the standard, and we didn't drop the standard just because they were nice enough to contribute. We're doing better, but it's because in 6 years the brand has grown. So while 3 years ago we were desperately knocking on every door trying to beg for some support, now it's a little better. We have companies that come to us and they don't want to advertise with us, they don't want to give us money, but they want us to make something for them that is like what we do. So maybe they want an internal magazine, maybe they have a project that they want to put out, maybe they want to tell stories of their work. NGOs sometimes want to tell stories of the projects they support. So that's how we're able to function. So we do sell the magazine, we sell some advertising, but in order to be able to pay some of the people that make the magazine go, we do a lot of side projects.
And can you say that your magazine you said that the brand is more recognized, but do you think you have impact as a long-form journalism on the Romanian society, or?
I think when you do this kind of work, it's really important what you measure. I told a story today too. We had a fire in a nightclub in Bucharest at the end of October on Halloween, and 64 people died. and that led to the government falling, and it led to all sorts of changes. And we did a story in a little over a month, and we recreated that night. So we interviewed about 60 people, read hundreds of pages, looked at photographs, videos, and we put it all together and we recreated that night. And it was read online by more than 100,000 people. The issue sold out, which has never happened to us before. But in terms of impact, those are better numbers than we ever had. But in terms of impact, what I value and what my colleagues value is the 300 plus survivors from that fire, many of which shared that story saying, if you want to know what I went through, read this. So that's what I measure in terms of impact, that you have a really traumatic event and the people who are there say, this reflects my experience. So if you want to know what I went through and what this night meant for me, read this story. So for us that's impact.
Yeah, I want to connect to that when I ask you what was maybe the hardest article you did, or in the magazine you mentioned the article about the girl and what in the end mattered for you most. Do you remember?
Yeah.
So can you say that? I mean, that's like exactly the thing why maybe people do this voluntarily, or why they do it in small magazines or in NGOs.
So I'm going to try to be brief so I don't hog the whole time. We did a story on a young girl, 20 years old, who died in a summer camp. She was a leader of a student organization and just suddenly collapsed. And we decided to do this story because it seemed like there was a story to tell there about this new generation of Romanians who has known nothing of communism and who like building stuff and doing stuff for other people, and then suddenly at 20 your life just stops. So we did a very similar thing like we did with the club fire. We tried to figure out what happened that night because nobody knew. There was no clear cause of death. The ambulance didn't get there in time. Nobody was able to do CPR, so everything that could go wrong went wrong. So we wanted to put all the pieces together. So we did the story, and when it came out, everyone that knew her and worked with her said that this is the best memorial that she could get. But the most important thing that happened is that the mother contacted us and said, until this story, nobody was able to explain to me what happened with my daughter. Not the ambulance, not the police, not her friends. And now I have the story that can give me some kind of closure. Again, is that going to sell the magazine and make us profitable? Probably not. Does it have impact and does it touch the lives of people, which is what we want to do? Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So, Tomáš, would you like to do such a journalism in SME more often, or at all?
Yeah. I would is the short answer, but the discussion or the criterion is impact, which is one criterion, and the cost effectiveness is the second one. And in a big media company, you can make this story time to time, but not every month, every week, or every day, because it will be not profitable. If the question is if the long form is more profitable, that well-written short story, then the short answer is not. It isn't. But funny answer. We want awards. We want have more prizes, but the real answer, we believe that this kind of story every serious medium needs to have. So we try to make them, we try to make some impact, we try to change policy of state by these stories, but we are not thinking in terms of cost effectiveness and profit in this kind of stories. But
if we talk about Detroit, wasn't Detroit article that really got people subscribed to piano in some terms, that it got really successful in this way?
It was many years ago, so that comparison we cannot to make, because to be successful in 2012, 2013 is another story as to be successful in 2016 in terms of paywall and premium content. So it was profitable story, but the more important factor was that it has impact on policy of the state. People in state organizations started to think about the future of automotive in Slovakia. They started to talk about minimum wages, about what is the intellectual economy of the state, and that impact was more important than 200, 300, 1,000 pianos sold.
Christian, did you have any such a story that impacted the government or some, government or any organizations that they started to think differently about some topic?
The great thing with this story, as you could tell from what Thomas is saying about the car industry story, is that because it allows you to go into detail and it allows you to show the insides of how something works, it might be able to expose in a really important way the mechanisms of something. So we had a series that we did on domestic violence, and we did a number of stories where we followed women mostly trying to get out of abusive relationships and then go through the whole system. So trying to get help from the police, then trying to get help from a shelter, then trying to get help from an NGO. So because these stories are really good at showing you how things work, we could pinpoint where things fail. And our stories were part of a packet of things that happened to lobby through changes in the way how the protection order is issued by a judge when you go complain to the police. And then we do a lot of stories on inequality and poverty, and a couple of the stories that we did, one on education in very poor rural communities, and then another series that we did on the poor Roma neighborhoods in Bucharest. They were cited in the government's new anti-poverty policy. But I think the reason these get read at these levels is because they're able to go into depth, and even people in government sometimes don't know how life works. So when they read it, like, oh, so you need to wait a week to get a protection order? Well, you could be killed if you wait a week. Let's cut that down to 48 hours. Well, see, that's progress. So they can help. It's not. I don't think it's journalism's job to change the law, but it could definitely, raise the ball.
Okay, so what is, I think, important in your magazine is really that kind of deep involvement in all the topics. So how did you manage that? How did you reach that people, or your people, they are not really employees, but like your writers, your reporters get so involved? Was it like you found them and they were ready to go to be these journalists, or there was some education needed and some training needed?
Some of the writers, maybe most of the writers that are sort of our senior writers, we've kind of grew up together. Well, in the past 10 years, so we've worked a lot together. So I think they started being newbies, just like almost anyone who's young in a newsroom or out of journalism school, and they learned in time. And I think the only thing that I did as an editor or as a manager is, because we're small, I let them follow whatever stories they were interested in. So we have one really good writer, and she loves sports. So technically, if it were up to me, we would not publish that many sports stories. But because she loves it so much and she keeps finding good stories in sports, we publish sports stories. We have another reporter who's very interested in inequality and poverty. So that's what we let her do. So we don't cover everything, and we definitely don't cover lifestyle issues very much, because those get covered by, you know, the fashion magazines and everything. So we let the reporters just run free and tackle their interests.
Okay. So Tomáš, do you see any space for this kind of involvement of the Slovak journalists? And I don't mean just SME, but maybe at all in the Slovak journalism space?
Of course, there is. You had a workshop here a couple hours ago. It's important to say that you maybe can have talent, but writing is a lot about craftsmanship. So you can learn how to write. You can learn how to write short stories, middle stories, long forms. So it's possible to teach people how to write good long reads. For example, 3 weeks ago, a young journalist came to me with question how to write her first long form. She wanted to write about beauty and feminism, and we started with some kind of lesson about structure of story. The most important thing is to learn how to make storyline, how to make a script, how to start with structure of story, and then with that craftsmanship you can write any story you want. So it's possible to teach people how to write long forms.
Okay, but I guess that was in her and your free time, or it was.
Not at all.
What I want to know is, or where I'm leading is that maybe sometimes the journalists expect or don't expect that they will get a space if they will be interested to write such a story, but okay, not maybe in their job time, but maybe in their free time a little bit. Maybe to let them know that, hey, you can do that and we will give you the space, just not the pay for that.
It's not question of space, because the internet is, you can write, publish on internet anything, and it can be as long as you want. But it's not only about the free time. Detroit was written and was researched and reported and traveled in normal time. We can give the reporter the time to write the story, but he has to make a statement that will fulfill the promise of the story. So when he's talking about the story and the story is looking very good, it can be good, it will be good when he will get 3 weeks to write it, to report it, to travel in destination he wants, he will get this. But good stories are not so common as we think.
Christian, do you agree with that? Because we just talked and in 1 hour you gave me like 20 ideas for great stories in Slovakia, and I was like, I never thought about that.
Yeah, but I don't think Thomas was saying that there's no good ideas. I think he was saying that the execution of those ideas is not.
There is a laying on ground.
Yeah, I think your country, just as any country, is packed with good ideas, but there is a matter of taking them and executing them right. And the difficulty, obviously, for a publication like SME or any sort of bigger, more traditionally organized media, is it has to justify the time. So I completely understand that. What we wanted to build is exactly something that doesn't have to respond to this kind of pressure. Because when you have a reporter that has to fill a certain amount of space, online or in a newspaper or on TV, then they need to be part of that, making that case. What I would encourage anyone that wants to do this, though, is to keep, to keep trying. And I think, well, we did one quick exercise today that was really small, that got everyone writing about something in their own lives. And you could practice good writing by writing things that don't require you to go out into the field too much, but maybe go inside your own memories or inside your own world and tell a story that pertains to something you lived through. And I think there's a lot of stories in Slovakia that can reflect the things your country is going through. Like, I don't know, I would love to read an essay of somebody with a mixed ethnic background, how they grew up here and how they are, navigating being, I don't know, half Hungarian, half Slovak. These are the kinds of stories we often do, and they get great response from people, and they take less resources to do. They're still good stories.
Is it very important in that part the position of the editor, right? Like you talk about it, that in your magazine the editor is really like their team, the reporter and the editor, they are the team. So how is it in Slovakia? Because from my experience, I didn't get the editor writing, and I was really missing him, or we were really missing him when we were writing about the birth system in Slovakia. So how is the position, or how is the partnership of editor and reporter in Slovakia?
Editors at all, or editors of long forms?
Well, we don't have many long forms, so.
That's the weakest point of the process, because we have very good reporters. Some are sitting in front of us, but reporters need good editor, and good editor can. For me, good editor is more important than good reporter, because he can make the structure of the story, he can shape the story, and he can make that story even better. So the problem in Slovakia at all is that we have not enough editors in newspapers at all, and for long forms we have no editors at all. Maybe 2, 3, or 4 people can be very good long form editors in Slovakia, but they now are managing their newsrooms. They are managing newsrooms in Deník N, or they work as in state sphere, in government, so they are not editing at all.
So this is the important missing part in Slovakia, at least. Is it the same in Romania, out of your magazine?
I would argue, there's probably some British people that are going to kick my ass, but I would argue that in Europe overall, we don't have the institution of the editor the way it exists in the States. The editor as a partner, especially on complicated stories, and they don't have to be necessarily narratives. It could be an editor for an investigation or a big explanatory story or an analysis, because the reporter-editor relationship is very complicated. It's like a couple to some degree, because the reporter goes out, comes back with something, is really excited, and the editor is like, nah. So the reporter tries very hard then to impress the editor, but then the editor then shapes the story, and the reporter hates the editor, and the editor hates the reporter because they're lazy and they're late. But then in the end they make up and kiss, and there's a nice story that comes out. But that kind of relationship doesn't really exist in in the whole European space, the editor is more, in general, I'm generalizing here, but it's more the boss or the person who approves a project, approves a story, maybe reads it a couple of times, maybe puts it online, but is not really there throughout the process the way it happens in the States. And that's not only in journalism, that's valid for books too. Book editors in Europe are mostly the same. They let the writer write whatever they have to, and maybe they say something at the end. While in the States, it's something that is, it's a constant relationship. So I don't know. I think we would all be better if we had more editors in this part of the world. But somehow we can build them. I think if you're a good reader, you don't have to be a writer or to be a good editor. If you're a good reader, or I don't know, watch a lot of films, read a lot of books, you'll have a feeling for structure, for theme, for character that could come in very handy. So if any of you there are readers and you want to try your hand at, reading stories and giving your opinions on them, bother, these guys. I'm sure they'd love to meet you.
So where I'm leading is like, if you could imagine the perfect journalism world in Slovakia, how this could work with the narrative and long-form journalism, like where will be the intersection between the traditional media, that if they will be, how they will be able to do this, like if you understand what I'm asking, like you have maybe that dream.
We had the dream when one was founded. It will be non-profitable organization at first. Then it will be digital. It will be online, and it will publish quarterly or yearly only. At first, some reporter would have the time to make some good reporting. Then he will write his long form. After a month, some editor will rewrite that long form, and the reporter will return to his reporting. And after another month, another editor will rewrite that rewritten text. And in the end, there will be a good story, maybe in a hypothetical world. In a real world, nobody will pay for this because it will cost a lot money. Nobody will get in return. So people will make this kind of reporting in free time.
Okay, Christian, did he just describe your magazine in some way? At least the process?
Not quite, but I understand how how this can work. But I don't think that ideal world is that hard to obtain. Have you guys seen Spotlight?
Yeah, maybe question, how many of you saw Spotlight, the Oscar movie? Yeah, great.
So
movie.
if you care about journalism in any way, watch Spotlight. It's a great movie, and it's based on a true story from Boston. And Spotlight is still a four-person investigative unit inside the Boston Globe. But you can have a 1-2 person narrative unit, try them out for a year inside a paper and or inside a TV station for that matter, and you could do documentary. But couple them with, so don't let them write, spend 3 months on a story about the oldest living person in Slovakia. That would probably be a waste of resources. But I'm sure that all of you here now will care about, what Slovakia will do at the Euro, and will they win their 100th game or whatever. What Slovakia will do with when they have the presidency of the EU starting this fall. What about the rise of right-wing extremism? What about, students or young people leaving to work in Austria. So these are all topics that are very suited, if you find the right angle, that are very suited for long-form journalism, and they could very much represent the interests both of the traditional media as well as the public. So you have the daily news, but then you have that profile, that surprising profile of, I don't know, the guy who's going to be in charge of making sure Slovakia understands how to run the EU. There's probably a guy or a girl that is going to show them how you do this, or maybe maybe you have a player with a particularly interesting story on the national team, or I don't know.
Yeah, so
that's what I would try, unless somebody here wants to start a quarterly print magazine.
Then you can give more advice.
Well, last time I was here, I saw independent quarterly publications here. They're just doing something else, like this coffee magazine.
Yeah, we have some food magazines.
Yeah, so you guys are already doing some of that. Just because it's not politics doesn't mean it can't be valuable content. So that coffee magazine is awesome. The food ones were in Slovak, so I couldn't read them. But there's a space, and some people are buying them. Maybe not enough to sustain them, but if you pair them up with a strong brand behind them, I would give that a try. At least pilot that.
Okay, thanks. So maybe now questions from the public.
Okay, I will start. My name is Thomas, if you don't know me. I'm the editor-in-chief of Mono, and now I will be the bad guy for Thomas, our co-founder as well. I would like to ask, Christian mentioned today a lot of stories where they were spending a couple of months on them, but they didn't spend like every day on them, like just maybe once a week or every 2 weeks they spend 1 day, 2 days following somebody's stories. Honestly, I don't remember something like that being done too much in Slovakia, because you said that you are doing long-form stories in SME like once a month, once or 2 months, but I haven't seen like on the big topics of our age, like cultural war, LGBT, now rise of neo-Nazis again. I haven't seen any reporters spending like once or 2 weeks, once a month, 2 days, and then publishing half a year. Because I understand they cannot spend 5 days a week because they need to do stories, but if it is so uneconomical if they just take 1 day off every 2 weeks, because I get this answer for the photographers why they don't follow long-term stories. We said like, oh, we need to do every day, but I said like, come on, once a week nobody will notice if you're there.
It's possible, but it can be everybody. You can have a department in your newspaper or in a medium about 2, 3, 4 people which are working on bigger stories and long forms. But in SME Daily there are 120 people just in SME Daily, and not everybody can make his story work on his story 2 weeks. 90 people have to work every day, to write every day, to make photos every day, videos, TV, whatever. And some people, 1, 2, 3, can work on bigger issues, but only 3 people.
Okay,
and 4 or 5.
And they do, like excluding Adam, who is doing investigative stories?
But it's kind of long-form reporting. Like you cannot exclude Adam.
Okay, I mean reporting, we like not investigative journalism, but like going to the field, being with the poor family, being with the LGBTs for like every second weekend, and like the long form narrative storytelling, what he mentioned today, like where you follow the story, follow some family, on which you show like some social inequality or like rise of neo-Nazis and so on.
It's possible. Because it's possible. Before Detroit, it was impossible.
And when we're gonna see it? Because because I was really surprised when it was the referendum, because it was like nobody wrote about LGBT, and then like 2 months before referendum, everybody started to go for one day to LGBT couple, and like, oh, this is the LGBT couple, and they don't look like on gay pride, and we spend half a day with them. Or we go to Roma settlement for half a day or 2 days, and we call it like documentary or something.
But you know why? But I never saw any pitch about this story. So
the problem is the writers.
Partially, not only. Because we were talking about this, when it's good pitch, when you have very good idea, you can write it. You can write it as a freelancer, but you can also write it as an employee of Daily, not only SME Daily, but of that 2 dailies in Slovakia. And it's possible. I wrote myself half year ago a long form about robots and the future of employment in Slovakia. Jakub wrote a long form about folklore and tradition in Slovakia. Stanka, but she's freelancer, wrote for us a long form about the Christmas and Christmas gifts. It's possible, but you need to have good pitch. Then you have to impress us with that pitch, impress us with the structure, with the story, and with the impact of that story. And then, hopefully, you can get your 3 weeks to write your story. But it's not impossible. Before Detroit and before the foundation of Mono, it was even impossible in Slovak medium to have this time if you were not Andrej Ban.
Great. That's what answer I was looking for. Thank you.
Okay, somebody else, please, question?
I would like just add to Thomas that I don't think that it is something that a daily needs to do. You just can't expect from a daily that they will publish a lot of long forms. You should ask probably a weekly magazine or a monthly, or then you should create your own medium. But now I'm the good cop here, okay? So I wouldn't be like really pushing hard on Tomáš, because daily has its own purpose. So it's just my input into discussion.
This is just a long discussion we
Yeah,
had
I know,
a couple of years ago. So
There's a microphone. You want to say something? Okay, please. More questions. Okay, here in the back.
Hi, I would like to ask how do you repackage the long form articles, because I guess you don't publish that many, as you said. So like how do you repackage them, or how do you rerun them for the public, because I guess every time you run them online also, not everyone sees them. And my second question is, what are you doing long form podcasts like Guardian does or Wired started doing a bit ago? Thank you.
Thanks. Those are two good questions. The first one is, we care a lot about the print product, so we work a lot in terms of packaging the whole thing. So I edit text, but we also work a lot with photographers and illustrators. So oftentimes they will do their own thing to complement that story. So we put a lot of effort into that. We do put our stuff online, but we're not online. We're not where online is today, so we're a little bit behind. But the good thing about a well-reported narrative story is that it's sort of evergreen. So oftentimes we take stories that we've done 3-4 years that are still relevant for something that comes up now. Like we have the mayor race in Bucharest in June, and we can rerun a profile that we did on the guy who ran as an independent 4 years ago and now is going to run for a major party. So we're going to take that out so people can remember where this guy was coming from. So we try to bring out stories from the archive when they're relevant, and these kinds of stories are often relevant. a long time after, and we speculate the ones that we know will generate interest. We just published a profile of a handball player. Romania happens to have the best handball player in the world, is Romanian, and she plays in Montenegro. So we published that in Romanian. We translated it into English. We sent it to news outlets abroad. So that got a lot of coverage and traction. We also convinced a bank to give us 4,000 euros to print that story as a small booklet that was distributed at a game. So 8,000 people who went to see Romania play Norway got our story. So this is a way that we try to keep the stories moving in the world. And the short answer to your second question is we've not gone into podcasts, although we love audio storytelling. But the reason we're not there is because we don't think we can deliver the same kind of quality. So we listen to, our inspiration are things like Radiolab and This American Life and Reply All, which is a tremendous show about the internet. We can't do that now. So, and we don't have anyone who wants to experiment, because that also matters.
Okay, somebody else, please. I would like to hear maybe from some of you that raised the hand if you are reading long form, which was maybe the one long form that got you into the trying to read. Somebody, please. Okay. Takže ak niekto chce, naozaj by som veľmi rada počula, že ktoré sú tie longformy, či už slovenské alebo zahraničné, ktoré pre vás znamenali, že ste možno, že vás to zmenilo na niečo pohľad. Niekto? No, ktorí ste dali ruku hore. Akože pre mňa je to dôležité aj z toho pohľadu, že robíme mono a snažíme sa tam robiť tie longformy a že či vôbec sa triafame do vkusu slovenského publika. Naozaj nikto. Dobre, možno jedna otázka. Prečítali ste si napríklad práve ten článok o deťoch, ktoré zomierali v aute, rozpálených autách, keď zostali zabudnuté svojimi rodičmi? Diana.
Hej, ja som práve preto nezdvihla ruku, lebo mňa ovplyvnil presne ten istý článok, čo teba, tak som sa nechcela opakovať, ale to bol pre mňa tiež veľký popud, že to má zmysel čítať tieto dlhé články, lebo dávajú úplne iný pohľad, že ten človek zrazu chápe to, čo predtým nechce pochopiť, lebo sa ti zdá, že ten rodič, ako môže zabudnúť svoje dieťa, zrazu úplne sa vcítiš do toho človeka, vieš pochopiť ako sa stane tá vec, alebo vieš pochopiť kriminálnika, proste vieš pochopiť hociakého vraha, alebo ten článok ti poskytne ten background a to pozadie a prečo je ten človek taký, aký je. A má to úplne zmysel, absolútne si myslím. Mňa by zaujímali témy, poviem, že najrôznejšie, ale to hlavne ženské témy. To, čo si spomenul o tých pôrodoch, tak ja to vlastne robím teraz cez dokumenty a veľmi ma zaujíma. Chýba tu absolútne informácia o tom, aké situácie na Slovensku, že tu máme obrovskú krízu v pôrodníctve a vo zdravotníctve. Prečo je tá kríza? Prečo ženy utekajú do Rakúska 30 rokov potom, čo tu už dávno není komunizmus, tak naďalej utekajú proste na západ rodiť a takéto veci. Určite je to obrovský priestor. A čitatelia, ktorí na to čakajú.
Super, ďakujem. Ono práve tie témy, to je niečo, čo si človek ani neuvedomuje, že máme kopec tém, len naozaj uchopiť ich ako keby z trošku iného uhla pohľadu. Ešte niekto by mi tu dal? Áno.
Že mne tu veľmi chýbajú ženské témy vôbec, čo sa týka podľa mňa, že feminizmu. Tým, že neprebehla tá revolúcia, alebo proste ten feminizmus, že tu bol komunizmus, tak to vôbec vznik, ten význam slova má veľmi nejasný význam. Veľa ľudí vôbec nevie, o čo ide a veľmi skreslene to vníma. A tým pádom, že sa nevenujeme ženským témam, tak a nemôže prísť k tomu posunu, aby tá spoločnosť bola rovnoprávna. Ja som mala pár zážitkov nedávno, ktoré ma otvrdili v tom, že absolútne nie sme rovnoprávni. A to ide akoby jedno s druhým, že to, že sa dostal Kotleba, kam sa dostal, odzrkadľuje to, že ako tu ľudia vnímajú jeden druhého a vlastne to, že ako vníma muž ženu a žena muža, že my tie problémy, teraz už asi možno zachádzam príliš ďaleko, ale proste mala som zážitok, ktorý mi dal jasne najavo, že tu veľmi veľa ľudí nie len, že nevníma ľudí iného náboženstva, ako rovnoprávnych, ale nevníma ani svojich najbližších príbuzných a dokonca partnerky ako rovnoprávnych. A tomuto sa to nikto nevenuje, že máme podľa mňa na Slovensku veľmi vážny problém s týmto.
Narazila si niekedy na také niečo na Slovensku?
Na články nie, len skúsenosti. A ešte prepáč. Totižto, celé to vzniklo z toho, že BBC ma oslovilo. Kvôli tomu, že som robila dokument, ktorý sa zaoberá ženskou témou menštruáciou a mi povedalo, že chceli by sme robiť nejaké témy na Slovensku a ako je to tu u vás napríklad so ženskou alebo s feminizmom, alebo teda tam sa teraz diala taká veci, že ženy majú nárok na voľno počas menštruácie. A ja som pátrala teda, kto sa týmto zaoberá tými ženskými témami, ani vo vláde mi nevedeli povedať meno ženy alebo organizácie, ktorá by to riešila. A o tom potom aj vyšiel ten článok BBC, že sme proste niekde a tu je pre mňa obrovský priestor. Veronika, je to na tebe.
Áno, ďakujem. No, je to presne o tom, že vrhnúť sa na tú tému a nejak ju uchopiť. A ja by som sa možno ešte predsa len opýtala Kristiana, že mňa zaujalo práve to, že akým štýlom robíte magazín, so what's the... Okay. Teraz som už úplne pomotaná po slovensky, po anglicky, ale dokončím po slovensky, že váš magazín má ako keby tému, okolo ktorej sa točí. Okolo ktorej sa točia následne články, čo ma veľmi zaujalo, teda napríklad, že žena muž. Vysvetlil by si to?
So we're working on the next issue, and the topic, the sort of the large definition for the topic is female/male, and it's really a wide definition. But we try to do stories that have to do that deal with genders. So we have 4 or 5 personal essays. So we have a young woman who's writing about her struggles with weight. We have one guy who's writing about how beards defined the men in his family throughout the history of the family. We have another young woman who's writing about the objects that define relationship. And especially the objects that you find in your partner's house that don't belong to your life. So we have the personal side, and then our magazine usually tackles sort of the personal, and then it moves to bigger things. So we'll have a story on violence against women, but it's sort of a bigger analysis and questions of power, cultural context, the relationship between men and women. Then we'll have a story about a transgender man who is now doing a documentary about how a woman became a man and how he came out to his family. We're doing a story about teens coming out as gay. And we're doing a story about Romania's first UFC fighter woman. UFC is Ultimate Fighting Championship. So we have a woman that's going to fight in Zagreb in 2 weeks in her first UFC fight, and her nickname is Barbie. So we're going to do a profile on her. And then we have an illustrated story. An illustrator is drawing her own experiences on Tinder. So it's called 5 Tinder Dates, and it's going to be a 20-page illustrated story. So yeah, I pretty much gave away almost the whole issue. But the point is that we take a whole theme and then we try to do various types of stories to sort of round out and cover that theme. But she's right that usually, well, in this part of the world, issues relating to like, it sounds banal, but women are an undercovered segment. So sort of issues of, gender dynamics, inequality, pay, birth, rights around birth. They're not, we think they're covered, but they're not really covered adequately and enough. hope this helps. That was a long answer, sorry.
Okay, thank you. So if we don't have any more questions, I would like to maybe ask you or invite you to subscribe to our newsletter on of Mono. We are sending each 2 weeks digest of the long read articles, mostly from foreign media, from American media, but also from Slovak media. So please subscribe. You can find it on our Facebook, Mono Magazine, or on our website, mono.sk. And well, what else to say? Thank you very much for coming. One of the reasons or one of the ways how to make this work in Slovakia is through the readers, when the readers will actually show that they are really interested in this kind of stories. So next time SME is going to run something long form, so please write them. That was great, and make it again as soon as possible. So thank you very much, and please stay. We can talk a little bit just here face to face.